We polled earlier. You guys said that about 40% of you planning to take the Focus Edition. If you want to take the Focus Edition, you have a phenomenal course on the Focus Edition. You can also benefit from the articles that we put in over here. I'd recommend looking at the article number 3, which is on study plan, the number 4, which is a live demo of our GFE study planner. One more question before I move forward. How many of you are e-GMAT students? Let me just put in over here. Clear all answers. How many of you are e-GMAT students here? Select yes if you're an e-GMAT student. Select no otherwise. If you're not a paid student, then select no. You're still exploring the free trial. All right, about 60-40 is what I'm getting as a sense over here. That's good to know. About 100 students here in the webinar right now. Okay. All right, we have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free number properties webinar tomorrow. In this, we're going to talk about the remainder equation. We're going to start from very simple problems, and then we're going to take them to the most challenging data sufficiency questions that you've seen on the remainder equation. Again, if number properties is an area where you cannot solve 700 level questions comfortably, definitely register for that. Then we also have a critical reasoning webinar, CR, regardless of whether you're taking the current GMAT or the Focus Edition. Is really, really important. Pre-thinking is a skill that you need to solve every CR question, more specifically the more challenging ones. I'll host this webinar. I'll also talk about how to pre-think assumptions as well. So that's exactly a week from now at 7:30 p.m. IST on Saturday, the 14th of October. You can register for that as well. All right. And then when do you plan to take the GMAT? We've already covered most of it, but 35% of you are planning to take it in 46 to 75 days. About 30% of you haven't taken a data as of yet, and it's about 35% are in the 31 to or 0 to 45 days. So a healthy 23% in the 31 to 45, and about 15% here in the 0 to 30 days. Okay, with that, let me go into the webinar pane. This is what I call as a webinar pane. You should see a slide that says, how do you score 95th percentile or better on the GMAT? And very soon what you're going to really see is a Q&A or a question and answer part. If you have a question, and this is the Q&A part, post that question in the Q&A part. That way it goes in a queue and it allows me to answer that question. During this webinar, I will ask you lots and lots of questions, and those questions will all be on the right hand side. So just as just as a decorum for this webinar, my questions, all of them on the right hand side. Your questions are towards the bottom. Avinash, the fees for PSP is just write to us. We don't charge anything for the PSP. If you're an e-GMATer, you can use the PSP as many times as possible. So just write to me at rajat@e-. And say this is where I am. This is what help I need with building my personalized study plan. I'd be happy to really help you with that. Okay, so what do we want to cover today? So as I said, my goal really is to make sure that each one of you can create your own study plan, can visualize your own GMAT journey, can define metrics that you should track to reach your target GMAT score. At e-GMAT, we are very big on personalization and making your GMAT prep deterministic and trackable. So, and then through this webinar, we will talk about why and how it's important to ensure that your GMAT prep is completely trackable. We follow this philosophy, and because of this philosophy, over the last 3 years, we've increased our share of 700 plus scores that we've delivered on GMAT Club. We were at about 35% in 2019. Today, and as as late as last week, since 2020 till about last month, we've delivered about 60% of all 700 plus scores that have been reported on GMAT Club. Okay. Okay. Now, I see a couple of questions as well. I have a question from Avinash. It says, in how many months will I get a 700 plus on the GMAT if I follow the PSP? So again, this depends. As I said, we're all about personalization. It depends on your starting, your target scores. And again, I love the fact that you're asking all of these questions about the e-GMAT offering, but we have a lot of e-GMATers in the webinar as well. We have a lot of people who just want to understand about their study plan. So let's spend the next couple of hours, figuring out how to build your study plan. And then after that, if you have questions about our offerings, I'd be happy to answer those. I'll stay back for about 20 minutes or so, and I can answer those questions as well. And so I think that's something which is there. If you can't wait, just write to me, and we can help you build. Someone from e-GMAT, from the e-GMAT team, will help you address your query right then and there. Okay. Does that make sense? I'd like to see some yeses on the short answer part on the right hand side. All right. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to answer those. And by the way, pretty much everyone over here is a working professional. 95% of our students are working professionals. So every study plan that we create takes that into account overall. Now, let's talk about what does it take to ace the GMAT. And this is regardless of whether you're thinking about the current GMAT or the Focus Edition. And a lot of people, when they think about acing the GMAT, they focus on these things over here. They focus on answering questions as quickly as possible. They focus on figuring out, hey, which section to attempt first, which section to attempt next. And this starts to become even more critical in the GMAT Focus Edition, because in addition to being question adaptive, it is also somewhat section adaptive overall. A lot of people focus on, hey, how should I pace my test, and so on and so forth. These things are important, but overall, if I were to combine all of these things, that's about 15% overall. 85% of all your GMAT success comes from building ability, and I see more and more people focusing on this 15%, which, by the way, is only relevant once you have this 85%. So one thing that I want you guys to take away from this webinar is that when it comes to acing the GMAT, focus on building ability. Now, what is ability? Ability in the context of the GMAT is a very numerical term. It's not an abstract thing that I'm just mentioning. It's a measured term. You measure ability, and which means that you can build ability and you can track as you build ability, and which I think is a phenomenal thing. Now, what's ability? Let's kind of talk about this. All of us know accuracy. Accuracy is, when you take a 10-question quiz, you get 8 out of those 10 questions correct. You say, my accuracy is 80%. It's an absolute measure. It doesn't tell you how well you've done compared to someone else. Ability is a relative measure. What does that mean? Is that it tells you how good you are compared to other test takers. So ability is measured in terms of percentile. When you say that I'm at 80th percentile in critical reasoning, let me just write this down. If you say I'm 80th percentile in CR, what you're really saying is, of all the GMAT test takers, I am among the top 20% of test takers worldwide. Okay. One person who said my audio isn't clear, but from what I can see, my audio is going through loud and clear. Can some of you confirm in the short answer part if the audio is loud and clear? That'd be great. All right, perfect. So, how does the GMAT work? And the way you prepare for it, if you understand how the GMAT works, it'll be very easy for you to understand why is it that the GMAT focuses on testing your ability rather than accuracy. So what I'm going to show over here is attempts of 2 different students, and I'm going to focus just on the first 5 questions. If you understand the first 5 questions, you're going to understand the first 36, which if you plan to take the classic edition, and the verbal section is 36 questions. If you plan to take the focus edition, 20, 21, or 23 questions overall. So again, what we have over here on the y-axis is difficulty level. The higher you go on y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. On the x-axis, you have the question numbers. Okay. So case 1 or student 1 gets the first question. Usually the first question is around that medium difficulty level, gets that right. Then he gets a second question, which is slightly more challenging. You can see why, because as you go from question 1 to question 2, you're going higher on the y-axis. He gets that right as well. As a result, it gets a third question, which is even more challenging. You can see this is question number 3, even further up on the y-axis. He gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question, which is, you can see this is the fourth question here. It's the difficulty level of this is between that of question number 2 and question number 3. You draw horizontal lines from question 3 and question 2. You can see question 4 is smack in between them. Why? Because the test adjusts that difficulty level. He gets that right. Gets the fifth question, which is slightly more challenging. gets that wrong. Okay, that's the first 5 questions for student 1. Student 2, this journey is slightly different. He gets the first question wrong. Okay, um, as a result, he gets the second question, which is easier. Okay, everyone can see the slide, can see case 2 or student 2 over here, right? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. If you can't see this, then just join again, and then the problem should sort out by itself. Okay. So gets the second question, which is slightly easier as a result. Not as a result, because of that, because of the fact that it's easier, maybe his ability is slightly higher. The student gets that right. Gets the third question, which is slightly more challenging. You can see we're going higher on the y-axis. Gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question, which is easier. Gets the fifth question, which is easier, and gets both of them correct. Now, if I were to end the test at question number 5, uh, who would get a higher score? So who's doing better at the end of question number 5? Let's assume this is a 5-question test. I'm going to remove broadcast results and let me get my poll question over here. Who's doing better at the end of question number 5? All right, I have about 50 responses, about 117 students here in the webinar. Let's get a few more responses, guys. Who's doing better? Question number 5. I have 60 responses. You guys are here. Let's get to at least 80 before I broadcast results. 67, 68. Come on. It's not a trick question. Just think about it. All right, 73. Let's get to 75 at least. 73 still. 74. One more. One more. There's a lot of resistance at 74. All right, we have 75. 76. I'm going to end the poll. Broadcast results. 67% of you say that student 1's doing better, and 33% of you say student 2 is doing better. Definitely student 1's doing better. Now, the question is why? The question is, why is it that student 1's doing better? Those of you who said student 1, why? Because of the barrier clear. Okay, please be a bit more elaborate. Yes. I like the other answer a lot better. Answered more questions with greater difficulty. Solved tougher questions correctly. That's what N said. Okay. Demonstrated higher ability. Absolutely. Okay. S1 and S2, both of them have identical accuracy. Both of them have 60% accuracy or 3 out of 5 questions correct. So that's not there. But if you think about it, student 1 has gotten the opportunity to answer 5 questions. Each one of them was either at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. Okay. Student 2 got only the first question that was at the average difficulty level. So to the test, he demonstrated a much higher ability. Why? Because even though their accuracies are identical, the student 1 answered more correct, more challenging questions correctly. Okay. Again, your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. Now, the GMAT doesn't work in as simple a fashion, but the principle that it uses is very, very similar. Okay. And Christina has a question that says, so if we answer a question and then we have an easier one, this means that we've made that wrong choice. Christina, first of all, let me just say this, do not try and judge yourself during the test, because of the fact that the algorithm is slightly more sophisticated than that. And number 2, you are not a great judge of the difficulty level of. Can you guys hear me clearly? Yes. Okay. Hold on. I think just give me 1 second. I want to make sure that the audio comes through loud and clear. Now you can. Perfect. Yes. All right. How does one define difficult? That's a great question. So, how does one define difficult? How do you think the GMAT defines a question as difficult? Any idea? Confidence level. Okay, depends on how many people. Yeah, that's as simple as that. It depends on how many people answer that question correctly. That's just as simple as that. That's how the GMAT defines a question as difficult. A difficult question on the GMAT has about 40 to 45% accuracy. A medium difficulty question has about 65% accuracy. An easy question has about 80% accuracy. Okay, just as simple as that. Okay. Now, a lot of people really say the algorithm that the GMAT uses is fairly challenging. It's very complex. Don't try and understand it. Um, but what I really say is, if you've hired someone, if you've sat in an interview, you actually understand how the GMAT works. Let's talk about how many of you have hired anyone over here? Have you guys hired anyone? Okay, never, not yet. All right. You've taken interviews and you've hired, yes, because essentially what we're going to talk about is the interview process overall. If you've sat for an interview, you probably have experienced the process of hiring, so you'd be familiar with this as well. So let's say you are someone who's a hiring manager, and you have this vast repository of questions available to you, because essentially that's what the GMAT has. Okay, and you have to place an individual in one of these five positions in a company: an analyst, a manager, a director, a vice president, and an executive vice president. Okay. Now, one of the first strategies that you would really do, because you can only ask 20 questions or 22, 21 questions or 22 questions, or 23 questions, I'm sorry, is to really say, can you figure out where this individual is? So the first question that you're going to ask is that of a director level. Why? Because it allows you to go to either extreme in the shortest possible way. So let's say someone answers the first three questions correctly at a director level. What's the inference that you would draw at this point, and what would you do next? Okay. The first three questions at a director level, the person answered them correctly. What inference would you draw, and what would you do next? Okay. Seems like most, you can't hire it because you don't know where to place him, right? So the next questions are VP level questions. So at VP level, you ask him three questions. And this is what the person does. Tick, cross, tick. What would you do next? Depends on the questions, okay? In what ways? Ask one question for EVP. If wrong, then VP it is. Ask another VP, okay? Yeah, either strategy would work. I might ask another VP level question just to double check before I go to EVP level. Remember, I have 20 opportunities to ask him, okay? So I'm going to probably go with this and say, let's be very certain. If the person gets this right, then I'm going to make another decision and really say, okay, I'm going to increase the difficulty level here, okay? Now I'm going to go towards EVP level. And if it so happens that the person is 1, 2, and 3 mistakes, then what happens? Then what's your decision? Back to VP. You might just say back to VP. And you can see most of you are making the same judgment here, right? It's a very human decision-making system. Let's say I'm going to make a judgment here. Let's go back to VP. 1, 2, all right, and say, okay, I know I have this judgment about this guy about VP level, and then I have these two. Then what do you do next? So after these two, I have to make a judgment. The third question, VP or EVP, what do I do? Back to EVP, correct. So let's say if the guy does this, this, and this. Would you go down, stay at EVP? What would happen? Stay at EVP, correct. Now, was this challenging? Was doing all of this challenging? No. Okay. Was this logical? Absolutely logical, right? This is how the GMAT works essentially. Okay. Now, how many levels does the GMAT have? Here we have 5 different levels. Sorry about that. Let's just go back. Here we have 5 different levels. How many levels do you think does the GMAT have? How many levels does the GMAT place you in? Okay, one person's going in the right direction, 3, 5. What's the lowest score that you can get on the GMAT or the GMAT Focus Edition? The number remains the same. 200 on the current GMAT, and what's on the GFE? 205 to 805, 200 to 800. How many levels does that translate into? 205 to 805. How many levels? Come on, guys, this is a simple question. The lowest score is 205 if you take the GMAT Focus Edition. The highest score is 805. And one person got it almost right. The person who said 60, you got it almost right. The correct answer is 61. Why? Because both scores are possible. Okay. You can get a 205 and yeah, both inclusive, right? A minus B plus 1. Why 61? Because you can get a 205 and you can get an 805. Is it clear why 61 levels? A score of 700 is a level. A score of 710 is a level. A score of, yeah, it's a 10-point increment. A score of 600 is a level. And the GMAT places you in those levels. Okay. And this is where we talk about truly understanding the test and then building your study plan. Now, regardless of whether you think about the GMAT Focus Edition or the current GMAT, it has both these tests have 61 levels, and that hasn't changed. Now, the definition of those levels has changed a lot, which is why the GMAT Focus Edition has 100 percentile. The current GMAT doesn't have 100 percentile. Okay, but either way, regardless of the test that you are planning to attempt, there are 2 challenges that you need to overcome. One is to make sure that the test serves difficult questions to you, and the second is to make sure that you answer those questions correctly. Okay, why? Because your score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. Build that ability, then worry about these things. So this was something that I was just explaining in terms of principles. Here you have some very interesting data as well. And the person who really say, I've just started learning, I don't know any of this, so I know very little, probably in a better position than many of these other people out here. Why? Because essentially what you really see is even the fundamentals of the GMAT, many of us don't comprehend the same way as we should. So there's not a whole lot of unlearning that you'd need to do. Okay, so don't worry about it if you're just starting to prep for the GMAT. Okay, so what you have over here are verbal attempts of 2 different students. This is the pre-2018 version of the GMAT, and the reason why we have the pre-2018 version is because that was a time when the official mocks gave us tremendous amount of insights into how the GMAT worked, and so we had all of this data. Now the GMAT focusing mocks again give us very similar sort of insights, and in my next webinar you're going to see these charts being replaced by the GFE charts. Okay, now just to really prove why and how GMAT's a test of ability, and accuracy is not as strong a measure as ability on the GFE. Let's kind of really share some data with you. So these 2 students, both of these were e-GMATers. Student 1 has an accuracy of 71% between question numbers 11 and 41. Student 2 has an identical accuracy. The only difference is that student 1 and um, student 2 got the first 2 questions wrong. Student 1 answered the first 10 questions correctly. That's what it seems like, okay? And that's someone who's just measuring accuracy would infer from this chart, okay? So let's look at their scores. When you think about the accuracy, you think their scores are very, very similar. But when you look at the actualities, student 1 got a 97th percentile on his verbal. Student 2 got a 65th percentile on his verbal. And essentially what it means is that what the test told student 1 is that he's among the top 6,000 students in GMAT verbal, and what he told student 2 is, well, the test told student 2 is you're among the top 70,000 students when it comes to GMAT verbal. Right. A lot of people, when they think about this and they look at this over here, they kind of draw this inference to really say, is the GMAT's harsh? How many of you think that the GMAT's harsh? If you think the GMAT's harsh, select yes. If you think it's not, select no. Let's get a few more responses. Is the GMAT harsh? A simple yes, no question. About 54, 55 responses. But 75, close to 75 responses, 74. Need one more to get to 75. All right. Let me end the poll. I have 80 responses. That's phenomenal, or 79. And 71% of you think the GMAT's harsh. 29% of you think the GMAT's not harsh. The GMAT's actually not a very harsh exam. GMAT's a very forgiving exam. And a lot of people think the GMAT's harsh because they really look at these 2 questions and they really say that because the reason why this guy got such a low score is because he got these 2 questions wrong. How many of you are thinking that way? Hey, these 2 questions caused his score to go low. Okay, that's not the truth. It seems like that, but that's not the right inference to draw. Okay. So when you think about this overall exam, this guy made 9 mistakes, 9 out of 41, about a quarter of the questions wrong. He was able to get to that 97th percentile. Does that sound like a harsh test to you? Make get almost a quarter of the questions wrong and still get to 97th percentile. Is that a harsh test? Okay. So that clearly it's not a harsh test. In fact, the GMAT's a really forgiving test. For those of you who've taken the old GRE or the Indian version of the CAT, on those exams, when you make a mistake, there's no way to come back from that mistake. On the GMAT, because it's a computer adaptive test, you can come back from mistakes. Okay, so let's look at student 2, the guy who got a lower score, and let's kind of think how we as humans would draw judgments about his ability. Student 2 got the first question wrong. Now, the first question was a 50th percentile question, but half the people who actually, it was usually a medium difficulty question. So, but half the people who solve this question get that right. Then the next question that he got was an easy question. Essentially, 80% of the people who solve that question correctly, who get that question, solve that question correctly. He got that wrong as well. Now, if you get a 50th percentile and a 20th percentile question wrong, what's the judgment that I should make about you as a test taker? What's the judgment that I should make? Are you likely to be a 90th percentile student? No, not really. For those of you who are quant wizards, who understand probability, what's the likelihood that a 90th percentile student would get a 50th percentile and a 20th percentile question wrong, one after the other? What's the joint probability? How low? If you do the math, you're going to find that that likelihood is less than 1 in 10,000. Okay, so at this point, the test is pretty okay in thinking that this guy's not a super smart guy. So the third question that he got was a 10th percentile question. Fourth question, he got that right. Fourth question, 20th, 25th, 30th, 35th, 40th, 45th, and so on. And essentially, eventually got to the 80th, 90th percentile questions, but then he started to make mistakes again. Okay. Student one, on the other hand, got the first 7 questions right. At this point, he was already getting 90th percentile questions, and he consistently demonstrated reasonably good accuracy, which is why he was at that 97th percentile. Okay. So the kind of questions, so he can rise. And by the time he reached the 15th question, he was at the 70th percentile. But then he made mistakes again overall. So the test again got to his true ability. Both of these students were e-GMATers. Student one got a V44, which is 98th percentile, very, very close to the 97th percentile that the test estimated. Student two got a V35. Okay, so then the question really is, if you might say, okay, how the hell do I measure my progress? So there's a question, two really good questions, but one simple question answered wrong by the mistake lowers your grade. No, not one, but one after the other two simple questions that you answer incorrectly would lower your grade level. Absolutely. And if you truly are a 90th percentile person, you're not going to make those mistakes. Um, V43 in 2018 existed. It's a 97th percentile. It's the verbal score out of 60. Okay. And yes, the time is not considered. Okay. So then the next question is, how does the test measure my ability? So what the test does is it tracks your ability at a subsectional level, which is, in the verbal case, in the current GMAT, SCCR or RC, and on the quant side, arithmetic and algebra. So when you look at their ability scores, you can really see that they look really different. Student one had a 95th percentile measured ability in SC. Student two has an 81st percentile ability. Similarly, student one had a 95th percentile ability, student two had a 66th percentile ability, and then so on and so forth. Okay. Um, when you look at these students through the lens of ability, do they look different? When you look at these two students, do they look different? Yes, no? Okay. They look very different, right? So that's where, when I said the GMAT's a test of ability, an ability is not, an abstract term. This is what I meant. The GMAT measures your ability. For anyone who's seen the current GMAT focus score report, or has seen an the GMAT focus score report, or has seen an ESR on the current GMAT, you guys probably understand what ability is, and you've seen ability scores. Okay. So again, the GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. All right. So there are some questions. Is it better to spend more time on the first 10 questions so you can get it right? And there's another question here, should you focus on getting the first 5 questions right? A lot of people ask this question. And when they ask this question, they have this one assumption that's there, which is that if you spend more time on a certain question, you can answer it correctly, which means time is a substitute for ability. How many of you think that if I spend more time on questions, then I'm going to be able to answer that question correctly? Has anyone done that? Been confused about a CR question and spent 2 additional minutes and done this consistently across 10 questions that you've been confused on and tracked their accuracy? The answer is, spending more time beyond a certain amount of time does not lead to you getting more questions correct. Let me tell you how this is something what we call as the tuck time of a question. Let me get another whiteboard here. So this is how your accuracy versus time plot for any question goes. So okay, this is just for a single question, and you have time on this, and you have accuracy over here. So the higher you go over here, the higher the accuracy. Okay, so let's say you're starting at a really low accuracy, and me make this slightly thicker. Okay, you're starting at a very low accuracy, and as you spend more time, your accuracy does increase to a certain degree, and this is what we call as your accuracy time chart overall. Now, what this means, you just do this over here. This is the sweet amount of time that you should spend on a certain question. If you spend longer than that, you go into an area of diminishing returns. Has anyone experienced this where they actually marked the correct answer? They were very confident, then they said, let me just check my answer and see, and they marked the incorrect answer? This is that area. Okay. Now, you definitely have a much lower accuracy if you spend less time than your tuck time. So this is for those of you who've rushed through questions. So people who fall short on time, they mark questions towards the end. They see this over here. Their accuracy drops to 30-40% of what their actual accuracy is. Has anyone experienced that? Rushed to the last six questions on quant or verbal, and has gotten 70-80% questions wrong. Okay, this is that zone. This is shortage of time zone. This is, we call it zone 1. This is your tuck time zone, and this is where you overinvest and lose. Okay, and we've done lots of experiments at e-GMAT. We've worked with upwards of 50,000 students, and this has allowed us to run these experiments and get conclusive data on this. Okay, so spending more time beyond number 2 is not a substitute for building ability. Let me just tell you very, very clearly. Okay, anyone over here works in operations? Operations anywhere? Okay, whether it's well, when I say operations, I mean, building something. So in plant operations, or supply chain operations, anywhere. What is tuck time? Do you guys know what tuck time is in the context of a plant or a supply chain operation? The German word, TAKT, or tucked. The tuck time. So when you think about operations in general, the one of the most common ways of breaking a large process is to build it into smaller chunks. And for every chunk, for every operational step, there is a that this is called your tuck time. Okay, this is your tuck time. This is a German word, and again, Germans known for their operational efficiency. Coined this word. If you take longer than that time, you're going to get more errors. If you get less than that time, you're going to get drastically more errors. The same thing applies when it comes to solving questions for you guys. Okay, so don't spend more than the tuck time on any question. And if you're an e-GMAT, your Scholarium platform essentially tracks your tuck time for every question, for every difficulty level. So does that make sense? Okay. Another thing that I want to tell you is your tuck time improves as you build ability. So for many of you, to solve a CR question, you might take 5 minutes today, and that's okay. If you're really early in your learning process, that's what it's going to take, which is very similar to when you're learning a skill. You're going to take a lot longer to finish a task, and that's absolutely okay. Okay, because as you build ability, your tuck time is going to reduce. You're going to do fewer back and forth. You're going to know exactly what you're doing. You're going to have a much better idea of what constructs and sentences mean. So that will all lead to reducing your tuck time. Why? Because the reason you take longer is because you guys do back and forth. Okay. So what abilities does the GMAT measure? So there are 2 abilities on the quant side, 3 on the verbal side. And on the current GMAT, each of these subsections is independent, more or less. Each of these subsections has an equal weight. And there are many ways to get to your target score, which means that for you, depending on your natural strengths and your natural abilities, you need a target ability in each subsection. Okay. There are a few things which are common to each of this. The process of building ability, the sequence of steps that you go through to go from a 20th percentile to an 80th or a 90th percentile, that remains the same. Okay. And then each one of you has your own natural strengths, natural weaknesses, and which means that you guys need that personalized study plan if you want to get to that shortest and the most optimal path to get to your target GMAT score. Of course, in the GMAT focus, there's no sentence correction, there's no geometry in algebra geometry. So those two things are not there. You have data insights. Yeah, absolutely. But the fundamentals remain the same. Okay. So essentially, if you're aiming for the current GMAT, ask yourself these things. What ability scores am I aiming for this? If you're aiming for the GMAT focus, you have 8 ability scores. Can you guys tell me the 8 ability scores in GMAT focus? Can you tell me the 8 ability scores in GMAT focus? On the verbal side, you have 2 ability scores. Which are those? You can ask the question in the Q&A pod. CR and RC. Okay. On the quant side, which ability scores do you have? Quant side, arithmetic and algebra. And on data insights, which ability scores do you have? Data insights, which ability scores? Data insights is not IR. IR is in the current GMAT. Data insights. Data insights has data sufficiency. You have GI and TA. That has 1 ability score. TPA, 2-part analysis, and MSR. You get 4 ability scores on DI. DS multi, yeah. TA GI is together, but you got the person. There's one person who got this right. Okay. If you read any of the articles on data insight please explain GI and TA and TPA, ball, MSR. What do you want me to explain? There are subsections. DS is data sufficiency, graphical interpretation, table analysis, 2-part analysis, and multi-source reasoning. Very similar to in many ways. It's a combination of CR, RC, and essentially graphs. Okay. Want to know more? Just go to our blog. We have lots and lots of coverage on this. Or if you're an e-GMAT student, you have access to all our DI courses. If you're a free trial student, we have, I think, 2 modules out of the 30 modules that we have in DI. In the free trial, you can also check those out. Again, let's finish this section, and I'm going to answer a couple of questions that are there. So again, all of this was official mocks data based on anecdotal information. Now I'm going to talk about real data as well, which is actual GMAT attempts. Here's a student who went from a V17, which is about a 16th percentile, to a V40, which is a 91st percentile on verbal. You can see that 91st percentile is built on 3 ability scores: 94th percentile in SC, 73rd percentile in CR, and 79th in RC, and 79th percentile in CR. So essentially, you don't need to get 90th percentile on every subsection to get a 91st percentile on verbal. Also, look at his attempt history. When the questions were medium, he got most of those questions right. As questions became medium hard, he still got most of them right. And as the questions became hard, he made mistakes in half the questions almost, and he was still able to get to a V40. Okay. So again, my point, the GMAT's a forgiving test as long as you make those mistakes in hard questions. When you say averages don't match, can you tell me a bit more? That'd be great. And if you want to download his ESR later on, you can click on this link once you get the PDF. Okay. So the GMAT's a forgiving test as long as you make mistakes on hard questions. This one? Yeah. What's the doubt? What is the doubt? Which are the three scores that you're looking at? SC, CR, and RC? You should type them out. Who said that you have to average them out? How did you get average as a function from here to here? Think about it this way. If you have, let's assume just two subsections, okay? Let's assume CR and RC. And logically, you have to think about it. And I'm going to not explain the maths behind this to you because that's a very different section. And people have told me I tend to get, when it comes to probability and PNC, I tend to get overboard being an engineer and an algorithm designer. But let's say you have your verbal score. Well, okay, so let's kind of really look at GFE. It's composed of CR and RC. Now, a student has an ability of 80th percentile in CR and 80th percentile in RC. Okay. Do you think his verbal ability would be less than 80th percentile, equal to 80th percentile, or greater than 80th percentile? 1, 2, 3. Which of these? The answer is this. It would likely be about 87th percentile. 87 to 90th percentile. There's no SC here. This is focus addition. Okay. Let me hide this. And think about it logically, and you'd be able to understand why it will be greater than 80th percentile. Think about it logically, and you'll get it. And there's no complex math involved in here. Understand what ability is. Understand what 80th percentile truly means. If you go to the first principles, you'd be able to arrive at that conclusion. Okay. So then let's talk about some key questions. Do the first 10 questions matter? Should you approach them differently? Should you spend more time on the first 10? So these are all three are yes, no questions. I want you to really put in as why, N, why, N, N. So yes, yes, no, yes, 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 blah, 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 blah. So just answer these questions. So if you think it's yes, yes, and yes, and all of these things, then you should write down yeah, why. If you think it's N, 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 no, 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 then you should write down N, N, N. All right. Y, N, 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 Y, N, Y, N. Let's get a few more responses. About 100 students here. All right, N, N, N. Okay. So in the context of the current GMAT, and let me just be very, very clear right now. In the context of the current GMAT, the first 10 questions do matter. There is a reasonable bias towards the first 10 questions. Okay. Should you approach them differently? The answer is absolutely not. You should not. Should you spend more time? Absolutely not. So it's Y, N, N. And again, just for the current GMAT. For the GMAT focus, my answer would have been N, 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 N. And this is one of the enhancements that they did with the GMAT focus. And I'm going to actually share the research that we did next week, that they fix the bias to a really large degree. They fix the bias that the first 10 questions had. And then the GFE algorithm is phenomenal when it comes to the questionable adaptability aspect of it. And for those of you who are more mathematically oriented, someone asked me this question on Reddit, and I kind of shared a paper that GMAT published in 2013 as to how to build up what's a block, how to assemble questions so that you can achieve this kind of adaptability. So I've shared a paper over there that you guys can download as well. So if you follow me on Reddit, you'd be able to do that. Okay, again, you don't need to know this, but the thing that you need to know is forgiving exam as long as you make mistakes on hard questions. Okay. Now, why is it that the first 10 questions, why shouldn't you approach the first 10 questions differently? If you truly are a 90th percentile student, then this is who you are. Your accuracy in medium questions is 90%. This is during your prep phase. This is what the definition of a 90th percentile student. Your accuracy in medium hard is 80, your accuracy in hard is 65%. Which means if the first 10 questions are mostly medium difficulty, you're going to get all of them right anyhow, going through the normal process. And if it so happens then a couple of those questions are hard, you're going to get most of them right. Even if you make a mistake, the test is not going to hold that negatively against you. Why? Because the test understands the difficulty level of the question. Okay. So that's where I said don't approach them differently. Now, what happens when you approach them differently? This number goes to 75%. For the very same reason that you become overly cautious, you actually overthink answers, and this is when you underperform. Has anyone been in these shoes? Been overly cautious and underperformed on either the quant or the verbal section? What do I mean by approaching them differently? It's approaching them not the way you've done in mocks, but approach them, give them special consideration. Say, let me spend 3 minutes on the CR question. Let me double check my answers. Let me reread it again just because it's one of the first 10 questions. Why isn't this applicable to the focus edition? Because the enhanced the algorithm, so even if you make mistakes in the first 4 questions, the algorithm allows you to come back. If you have the ability, the algorithm allows you to come back. On the current GMAT, that doesn't work. It doesn't work as well. Does that help answer why isn't it applicable to the focus edition? And I'm going to share some data next week. So we did about 250 simulations on the focus edition, and that's where we drew this inference. That's where we drew all of these inferences. Okay. So the algorithm, the adaptive algorithm on the focus edition, in my opinion, is superior to the adaptive algorithm on the current GMAT. Okay, I have a question that's been in the Q&A part for a very long time, and it's by TS. Thank you, TS, for your patience. This question is: would you recommend delaying to next year's cycle and up for the focus edition, assuming that the focus edition is more widely accepted by them? So first of all, from what I understand, only Harvard and Wharton in R2 are not accepting the focus edition. Every other school accepts the focus edition. Okay, so that's something which is there. Now, has anyone seen the report that the GMAC released or MBA.com released, which is about the skill sets that that future employers are looking for in MBA? Has anyone read the report? What skills are we talking about here? It's on MBA.com. What skills were they talking about if you've read that report? Data analysis, yes. So there's a survey of employers. The MBA.com publishes a ton of research, and there is this survey of employers where they really say, hey, what skills do you look for in future leaders, future managers, and which of those skills do you think people have? Which of those skills do you think people are do not possess today? So it's called as readiness for the job market. Which skills are lacking? And there are 2 skills which are very, very relevant to GFE, which again you demonstrate through GFE. One is the ability to visualize data, and the second is to make decisions using that. All right. The skill that they think every manager possesses, where 90% of the employers think that is there to degree, is the basic managerial skills. They think everyone has those. That's not as important. Okay, so given that survey and given the importance of this, along with the importance of AI, so there is also a third matrix where they say, hey, what are functional and skill areas that are not as important now, but will become really important in the next 3-4 years? And why it's important to use, because the next 3-4 years is when you'd be going for the job market, right? And AI is one of the strongest skills over there. And again, your performance on the DI section of GFE in some ways signals your readiness to work with data, and in turn to work with what we call as the application layer of LLMs and AI. Not fundamentally building LLMs. No one expects leaders to build managers to build LLMs, but people expect, or future MBAs are expected to leverage LLMs and build essentially applications using those. Okay, So that's, in my opinion, which is where I love the Focus Edition. And in fact, I really don't understand how is it that B schools are really still accepting the GRE, just given what the GRE tests in this case. So that's my take on it. Okay. At the same time, B schools still accept the GRE, and so if you're struggling with the GMAT and you think the GRE is an easier test, which for some people it is, for many others it isn't, then do take it. But if you truly want to be a leader of the future, the Focus Edition is something that allows you to do that. If you want to be a consultant, if you want to be in corporate strategy, they'll be asking for your GMAT score. If you want to go into private equity or investment banking, they will ask for your GMAT score. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I would take the GFE and the GMAT. Would I recommend delaying the next year's cycle and opt for the Focus Edition, hoping that the Focus Edition is more widely accepted? TS, I wouldn't recommend delaying anything. Let me be very clear. Take the current GMAT, get done with this, and then in your first year, take the Focus Edition. If you're prepared for the current GMAT, 80% of your prep for the Focus Edition will be done. So yeah. So that way you don't waste a year. Does that help answer the question, GFE versus the Focus, the current GMAT? Does that give you a bit more insight? And for those of you who want me to make a video on this, I'd be happy to do that if you let me write to me about the skills of the future versus how the GFE aligns with them. What do you want me to reiterate? Please ask that specific question, and we'll be there. Okay. Now, the way that an adaptive test works is that it'll gauge your ability level and it'll serve questions to you that you'd make mistakes on. And it's really important for you to understand that, because you'd have to let go of some questions because they'd be too challenging for you, and that's not bad. Everyone on the GMAT makes mistakes. Our students, Magdalena got a V47 and a Q50. She made mistakes on her test. This guy again, oh no, Magdalena got a V48. This guy got a V47 and a Q48. This guy made mistakes on the verbal section. Of course, he made mistakes on the quant, but on the verbal section as well. Why? Because the test is going to gauge your level. That's essentially the job that the test has. Okay. What is LMN? Oh, I didn't say LMN. I said LLM, large language model. Okay, which is, if you think about ChatGPT, it's a large language model. If you think about Google Bard and the AI that Google offers, it's an LLM. Do you know if IIMs take the GFE? I cannot. So again, I haven't double checked it but for the executive MBA, if they would take the GFE, if they currently take the GFE, but they will take it next year because they won't have a choice, because they take the current GMAT for the exec MBA and say they won't have a choice, and they will have to take the GFE anyway. Okay. So what are the takeaways? Focus on building ability. Don't do anything different on the actual test. Focus questions the same way you do in practice. The last 1 month, where you've been solving questions the last 1 month, the 1 month prior to your test, just approach the test the same way. Okay. Now let's talk about your personalized study plan. We have this foundation now. Let's build on that foundation, build that personalized study plan. Okay. If you're a current e-GMAT student, you're not able to connect to a mentor for guiding me ahead, please suggest how long has it been since you wrote an email? Because again, remember, this is the weekend. And if it's been more than 1 working day, then of course, write to me and I'll make sure that you're connected to a mentor. If you make mistakes in one section and perform well in the other sections, will this compensate for the former section in the final score? Yeah, this is I want to make sure I interpret this. So to a certain degree, yes. I mean, for example, let's take the current GFE. If you want to get to a 645, you need a 245. Your sum of scores is 245. Okay, which means each of the sections is scored out of 90, so you need a 245. Now you could get a 245 by an 80, 80, 85. That gets you a 245. You could also get a 90, 80, and 75, and that will also get you a 245. So yes, that compensation does happen. Okay. So with that, let's go into personalized study plan. And before that, let's talk about what does a personalized study plan do? What's the job of a personalized study plan? Okay, help you to reach your target sectional scores. What else? What else does a personalized study plan do? Set goals, good. Work on improving the weak sections, really good. Personalize as per your strengths and weaknesses, really, really good. Track progress. It does lay the foundation for tracking that progress, absolutely, yes. Helps you stay consistent, yes, it does all of that. That's really good. So all of this combined is what a personalized study plan does. Okay, so we already answered this question. So in the context of e-GMAT, it answers these questions. One is, how will I reach my target GMAT score? How much time do I need to put in to get there? So the first question is really relevant, which is to, let's say, if you want to get to a 730 or let's say a 675 on the GMAT Focus Edition, what quant, what verbal scores, and then correspondingly in the current GMAT, what SCCR and RC abilities should you aim for, and the same thing on the quant side. And the GFE side, again, very, very similar things. So that's number one is what you need to answer. Why? Because with number one, you define your targets. If you aim for the wrong thing, you're going to spend your time and money on chasing the wrong targets, which actually is catastrophic. The second thing is clarity on how long will it take for you to achieve those targets. A lot of people ask me, and in fact, even in this webinar, I had about 5 people who asked me this question: how long will it take for me to get to a 710? Someone asked 740. Someone said I'm at a 650. How long will it take for me to get to a 740? Okay, so 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 um, so that's something that a personalized study plan tells you. And then even when you have those time estimates and those ability estimates, how do you achieve that ability? If you were to go from a 30th percentile to a 90th percentile in CR, and the plan tells you need about 50 hours to invested in CR. So where do those 50 hours go, and how much of that goes in learning, how much of that goes in just strategic practice, and how much of that goes in refinement over here? That's another thing that a personalized study plan tells you. And when you have all of these things, three things, you'll be able to answer all of these questions. Okay, so let's see, how does a personalized study plan do this? Now, this is again on the current GMAT. Has anyone tried the GFE planner? GMAT Focus Edition planner, has anyone tried that? Yes. Can't see on the website? You can. You can see it on the website. Just log into the e-GMAT account if you're an e-GMAT student. For those of you who've tried that, what did you get from it? For those of you who've tried that, what insights did it tell you? Your complete plan till the final, and with precise dates as to what you need to do when. Okay. What I'm going to show is for the current GMAT. The GMAT Focus Edition Planner goes 2 steps beyond this. All right. So that's something that you'd really see. For those of you who are e-GMATers, just go to my plan and you'd see GFE, the link for GFE there. Okay. So let's kind of talk about the current GMAT, and then for GFE, you'd get way more than this. Just be aware of that. So we're going to compare two students, Ayush versus Rafaela. Two very different students, but one's aiming for a score of 750. Rafaela was aiming for a score of 730. Ayush came to us after he failed. Well, I shouldn't say failed. He attempted the GMAT twice and was able to get to a 670. He had applied to Columbia. Columbia loved his candidacy and said, "Hey, we love you, but we don't love your GMAT score." And so essentially, go take the GMAT again. And this was sometime in the January time frame. So this was really in R2. That's something that was there. Rafaela came to us before her first attempt. She had a starting score of 600. So let's kind of look at how we go about building the study plan. We're going to start with Rafaela. Rafaela scored a 730. She is currently studying at Harvard Business School. So she started with a 600. She took a Sigma X mock, which is the e-GMAT mocks that we have. It gives you your ability scores. And when she took a Sigma X mock, these were her starting abilities. What can you gauge from her starting abilities here with regards to her strengths and her weaknesses? Weak in RC, weak in AR. All right. How about the strengths, guys? Let's not point weaknesses in people first. Let's first appreciate their strengths. How about strengths? What's phenomenal here? Amazing CR, yes. And SC. So when we think about and when we look at all of this, remember these are starting scores, guys. This is phenomenal. This is phenomenal. This for me is average over here. This is average. This is below average. And this is slightly below average. Okay. So that's something which is there. A lot of you have been asking what GFE. I feel like I should just put in uh, links for GFE. Here are some links for GFE that you guys can navigate to. Okay. There's a link to take the mock test as well. All right. But let's kind of get back to this because truly, if you understand this, it'll help you tremendously on the GFE as well because the principles remain the same. Okay. So I'm going to hide this so that we are clear with this. So arithmetic RC weaknesses, SCCR strengths, algebra geometry is where she's at par. All right. So that's something that we put this information in the planner, and the planner consumed this information and said, okay, you want to get to a 730, let's kind of build your abilities. These were her target milestones, as you can see from this. Now, here's something that you would notice. You have that 730 over here. You'd notice that SC and CR abilities, the target abilities, have not changed. Why? Because the planner doesn't like to suggest something beyond a 90th percentile unless and until it has to. So it kept the ST and CR abilities as the same and said, let's kind of try and push her RC ability. Now, considering that she's really good in SC and CR, bringing her RC ability up is much more easy. So that's kind of where it said, let's kind of leverage her strength on verbal. Let's try and get her to a V44. And then let's improve the quant only to that degree that is needed. Now, within quant, you can really see she was better in arithmetic, algebra, geometry. So we improved that to 83rd percentile. Her starting ability in arithmetic was really low. So the target arithmetic ability is not 80th percentile. It's just around that 60th percentile. Okay. Now, why is it important to really know this? To really say, I'm only aiming for that 57th percentile in arithmetic. Excuse me. Why is that important? Why is it important to make this determination right on day zero? What does that help you do? If you know that you're just aiming for 60th percentile in arithmetic, what decisions does it allow you to make? Okay, you focus on your strengths, just sail through your weakness, prioritize the plan, to know how much to practice, yes. Now, does she need to answer the hardest questions in arithmetic correctly to be able to achieve 60th percentile? No, right? Just she know, but in algebra geometry, she definitely does. Okay. Now, for someone starting at a 50th, 15th percentile in arithmetic, how much of a burden off her shoulders is this? It's a huge burden off our shoulders, yes. And that's something that you can do on day zero as well. And that's one of the reasons why we actually build this planner. This was built in 2019, our first planner. It took us about 10,000 hours to build this. We were doing this for the first time. The GFE planner took us about 3,000 hours. But when you think about this, we've had about 40,000 students since we built this planner. And so on an average, it's about 15 minutes of investment per student. And so this was a really profitable investment. And most GMAT experts can't do this for you. Okay. So that's why it's important to be strategic about these decisions. So now the next thing that this planner does is, so you have your target abilities, you've got to find those time estimates. How long will it take for you to go from a 49 percentile ability in algebra to an 83rd percentile ability, or a 39th percentile ability in RC to an 85th percentile ability in RC? So PSP generates those time estimates. Now, how do you build ability? I'm going to give you a mini tutorial on this. Okay. So in the e-GMAT world, and really in the real world as well, this is how you go about building ability in the most efficient manner. If your starting ability is lower than 60th percentile, this means that you have major conceptual and major application gaps. So you've got to focus on learning those first. If you don't build that foundation, you can go and practice all the questions that you want in the world. You're not going to improve. Has anyone done this? Started their GMAT preparation through brute force, practiced a ton of questions, and it's still not gone beyond that 50th, 60th percentile? Has anyone done this over here? Practice 500 or more questions without building that foundation, and as a result, has not crossed that 60th percentile. Come on, I'm sure there are some people here. Tell me, how many questions did you practice, and what did that tell you? We have one person who has the courage to say yes. 300 plus questions. Without building that foundation, you can practice all you want, you're not going to improve. Now, once you build that concept, one of the biggest things which is there is that you want to make sure that whatever you've learned, it stays with you as you move from SC to CR, CR to RC, RC to number properties to word problems. You want to make sure everything sticks. And this is where you go through the stage of mastering application. e-GMAT is, we have a very specific name for this stage. What do we call it? What do we call this stage? What do we call cementing? Yes, absolutely. So when you build concepts, think of, if you were to visualize this, you're building a wall. You're kind of laying bricks one on top of the other. You've gone from the floor to the ceiling. You've got to make sure that the wall sticks there. Got to make sure that it is able to take on lateral force, which is where you've got to cement. Once you've learned concepts, once you've mastered application, you've reached, and in the e-GMAT world, we call the cementing thresholds. Once you hit those thresholds, you're not going to forget what you've learned. Okay. And then after that, you can refine to perfection. Now, once you learn concepts and application, you get to a bare minimum 55th to 60th percentile. Once you master application, you get to a bare minimum 70th percentile. And once you refine to perfection, you can get to any percentile, but a bare minimum 85th or so, and up to 99th percentile. Okay. Those are the three stages of learning. Okay. So the planner understands these stages of learning and then gives you time estimates as to how much time do you need to spend on each of these stages. Now, the legend over here is, if you see something like this, it means that you need not study. You already have the ability in there. This is what you need to study. And if you have this legend over here, this means because you're not aiming for such a high ability, you don't need to do this. This is not required. Okay. For Rafaela, this is what the planner told her, and the new planner actually does this much more beautifully. In STCR and RC, all she needed to do was maintain, because this was already there. She already knew this. For RC, for arithmetic and for algebra, she needed to do the first two stages overall. And for algebra, she also needed to do the third stage. What kind of clarity does a chart like this give you? What does this tell you? And how simple is it when you think about what you need to execute on? It's where to focus efforts, where not to focus efforts. Okay. Let's talk about Ayush. Very similar target score, very different individual. He came to us with a 670. We asked him to take a Sigma X mock again. He was able to replicate that. And you can see his strengths and his weaknesses are very different. SC and CR were his weakness. He was all set in quant. RC was a relative strength for him. Again, we fed this data on to the PSP, and these are the target abilities. You can see how it kept his quant abilities to the same because this was a Q50. It did not want to take a chance because Q50 to Q51, on the test day, that variation could happen. So we said, let's kind of push his RC ability. We know we can push it to 93rd percentile, and then let's see what does he need to do with his SC and CR to get to that 750 score. Okay, Ayush went to Columbia, so clearly he got to that score. So then we got the time estimates from PSP, same thing over here. And this is what his PSP output, one of the outputs looked like. You can see a lot of investment over here, a lot of maintenance over here. And RC, we made him do cementing again and refining to perfection because it allowed us to push his ability to that 93rd percentile. Okay. Now, Ayush versus Rafaela. Look at the time spent. Rafaela practically did not have to spend time on SC and CR. Ayush had to spend about 4.5 weeks. Why? Because of the starting abilities. RC, Rafaela had to spend a lot more time because of her starting ability compared to Ayush, who still had to spend time, but not as much. Quant, Rafaela had to spend 4 weeks, which is about 110 hours on Quant. Ayush had to spend about 3 days. Okay, what they studied was very, very different. Okay, on Quant and RC, Rafaela had to start from basics, and Ayush, on the other hand, had to do the opposite in SC and CR. Okay. When you have this level of personalization early on, that's when you have clarity. That's when you know what goals you need to aim for. And when you do that, that's when your chances of success become a lot higher. Okay. And essentially, this is really critical because getting to that 730 is not as easy as you think. Very few people get to that score. And then we know this because we deliver more 730 scores than anyone else. And then we kind of conduct research on this. So in 2021, we conducted this research where we said, hey, how many of you have heard people say you don't need a 730, 740 to get into a top school? How many of you have heard people say this? Heard, okay, some of you have heard that. Okay. Now, in its absolute terms, that the statement's true. But there are people who get to a Harvard, a Stanford, a Wharton, Columbia with 710, 720. But then we wanted to really say how much of a difference does a 740 make? So what we did was we contacted about 500 of our students. Actually, it was about 650 by the time we got to the last question. And we kind of asked them, which schools did you apply to? We knew their GMAT scores. We knew their backgrounds. We knew their preference for geographies. Okay. And what we did was, for people who applied to M7 schools, we said those who had a 740 plus scores with comparable backgrounds versus 700 to 730, what are their chances of admission? And what we found was that people in that 700 to 730 bracket, they had a 13% chance to get to an M7 school. People who had a 740 or higher had a 28% chance. Now, 740 doesn't guarantee an admission, but it definitely impacts as in other words, 740 or higher had twice as much chance to get to uh, the target, an M7 school versus those in that 700 to 730 bracket. Okay. Scholarships, really, really critical. Um, so 740 plus, what we found was that people who got into an M7 and when they had a 740 plus, 45% of them got a scholarship. If they got to a top 20 school outside of M7, 82% of them got a scholarship. And 750, 760, many of them got full rides as well. And 62% of overall 740 scorers who were admitted to either M7 or T20 got a scholarship. And we're talking about $70,000, $80,000 worth of scholarship, not $10,000 or so. And this was the question that was the hardest to answer. It required us to get very, very specific individuals because we wanted a statistically significant sample. And the question that we wanted to ask was 740 versus 760. What's the delta in scholarships, man? And you needed at least 90 people in each group with comparable backgrounds, with all the application backgrounds to be able to do that um, uh, comparison in a statistically significant manner. And for us, the estimate came out to be that those 20 points lead to about a $35,000 increase in scholarship. So it really pays to get to a 760. Does that data motivate you to get to a higher GMAT score? Okay. So this was statistical data. Now let's talk about some anecdotal data. And these are some of our former students. The Victor scored a 770. He took the GMAT, I think, thrice. He got multiple full rides, as we can see over here. He despite being a non-native, he got a V44. And the reason why he was able to get to this was because he spent that refinement time in stage 3 of learning. He used data from Scholaranium to improve there. And he got a total scholarship of about $350,000 or so. Kongbui, when you watch this interview, what you're going to find is that this guy doesn't have perfect English. He's not someone who has a stellar background, yet he got 5 full scholarships. Okay. Now he got a very special scholarship from Ohio Fisher where the college paid him money to study. Has anyone heard of this scholarship from Ohio Fisher? You get $1,700 a month to study over there, which means your living expenses are also covered. Not only is your tuition, and your boarding covered, but you get money in your pocket. Okay. This guy didn't have any, and it's still there today, this scholarship. And Ohio Fisher has really good placement as well. I think it's one of the best investments you can make. Okay. And if you watch his interview, you're going to find that he kept things really simple. He knew what he wanted to do. He executed on it. If there's something called perfect execution, this guy did it. Okay. There's another student of ours who actually went to Wharton. She got a tremendous amount of scholarship from a bunch of schools. Okay. And if you go to our admits and scholarships page or our YouTube channel, you'll see students with scholarships totaling 10 million or higher. In fact, I think that number is a lot higher right now. Okay. There's no other prep company that has even half that number. Forget about admission consulting companies or so. And this is where I say 730 or higher can have a huge impact on your target B school and as well as on your future. Okay. And we can do this because we've delivered the lion's share of 700 plus course since, I'd say, mid 2020, early 2021 or so. And what it means is when you look at data on GMAT Club, then all of these other companies combined account for about 40%. And a lot of people think, consider us for verbal. What you don't know is we also account for a very large number of Q49 plus scores. And a lot of people talk about 5-star reviews. This number, we recently crossed 2,000 5-star reviews. So that's something that's there as well. And you can see all of this on our YouTube channel as well. How do you revise expectations with the Focus Edition? If you're thinking about 750 plus with the regular GMAT, that would be about 695 or a 705. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. It's percentiles. Percentiles are percentiles one way or the other. Yes, I understand this 705 seems not as good as a 750 or a 760, but it's percentiles. So I would really say this for those of you who take the GFE, and if your school's accepting the GFE, I think those percentiles would be revised in about 5 to 6 months, or about actually the next cycle would be when the new OG is released, which is June or October, which is the other time when the GMAC revises the percentiles. Um, and for those of you who are applying with the GFE in round two, you guys will have, I believe, a slight advantage overall. R2 2024, again, it depends. Are you looking for consulting? Are you looking for an exam that will prepare you for the future? Then take the GFE. Otherwise, take the current GMAT as well. But you've got to be very, very certain that you'd be done for the current GMAT, run for with your preparation by January, because I don't believe we have dates in February still. Although I haven't checked in the last 3 weeks, so I can't say. Yeah, consulting or tech, I'd recommend for consulting GFE. Tech, I think I can go either way. Okay. Yeah. So ability and stages of learning. That's something that we've talked about here. Now let's talk about why do people not improve. How many of you been preparing for the GMAT and are stuck at a 630, 640, 650? How many of you are stuck at a certain GMAT score? 540 and not improving. Good. What else? Get some more data. Difficult to improve. All right. First timer. All right. Still a student. Got it. Okay. So let's talk about 60th and 90th percentile student. Let me just compare this over here. So there are about 80,000 people who get to that 60th percentile, which means if about 200,000 people take the test. If you're at a 60th percentile, what this tells you is that you're among the top 80,000 students. If you're at 90th percentile, it tells you that you're among the top 20,000 students. So we're going to compare two students, and I'm going to talk about SC. And even though SC is not a part of the GFE, the principles would remain the same. Okay. So we're gonna come. Both these students start at a 30th percentile. Both these students spend 40 hours on SC, and one of them reaches the 90th percentile. The other one reaches the 60th percentile. The capability to improve is also very, very similar. A lot of people think they're not smart enough to get to a 90th percentile. How many over here fall in that camp? Think they're not smart enough. Hey, I'm not from an IIT. I can't get to a 730, 740. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Okay, let me just say this. The GMAT's a very logical exam. It doesn't require any prior knowledge. If you watch interviews on our platform, you're going to, and these are unedited interviews where people talk about their journeys. And what you're going to really find is there are people who falter, but once they take the logical approach, they focus on learning, they get to those high scores fairly easily. Okay. If you lack the foundation, then you're going to take longer. Doesn't mean you're not smart enough. All right. Okay. And trust me, a lot of non-engineers get to incredibly high scores. Okay. So the difference is how people approach preparing for the GMAT. And then this is something that will be familiar to many of you. A 60th percentile student really thinks of sentence correction as learning these grammatical rules in subject verb, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism, meaning. For them, when they look at an SC question, they try to do a comparison of the options. So they do a vertical scanning. They compare the options, and they really use splits to group options, and then they look at meaning. Meaning for them is a secondary thing. While learning, they use feedback just 7 to 10 times, and they do a lot of practice. In terms of those 40 hours, spend about 15 hours learning, and the other 25 hours practicing. So about 35% of their time learning, 35% is the upper end. Many people just spend about 10 hours learning and 80 hours and 30 hours practicing questions. Who falls in this camp here? Okay. Other people? A 98th percentile student understands that GMAT SC is about learning 200 sentence structures, and then how their combination, the concatenation of those sentence structures leads to the author being able to express a certain meaning. For them, meaning is the primary way to solve questions. For them, it's not just an error type. This take a lot of feedback while learning, about 100 personalized feedback points, especially if they're an e-GMAT student, and they leverage that feedback to correct their mistakes right then and there. And for them, even though they still spend those 40 hours, but 25 to 30 hours are spent learning, and as a result, only about 10 to 12 hours or 14 hours are spent practicing questions. Okay. Same 40 hours, very different utilization of that time, very different focus, and hence very different outcomes. Okay. And there are about 200 sentence structures on GMAT SC. So with 7 to 10 feedback points, you can't achieve perfection, which is what a 98th percentile student needs. So let's kind of really talk about what is this meaning-based approach. So what I want you to do is I want you to solve this question using the approach that you usually use. Okay. We put in a poll question. And since I don't want you to actually, let's put yes. Here is the poll question. I'm going to give you 2 minutes 20 seconds to answer this question. Good luck, guys. All right, last 10 seconds, get those answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. We end the poll. We broadcast the results. This is how you guys polled. Um, you can see choice C is really popular, choice D is reasonably popular, choice E is the most popular choice. This is good, but the most popular choice is just 45% of people have chosen this answer choice. Let me get in your short answer pod as well. So, and some of you probably knew the answer because I saw people just get on it right away. Okay. So one of the first things that you see over here is there aren't very many splits here. There are the answer choices start with the church coin, while the church coined, while the church coined, and that the church coin. So you have three beginnings. You have four of the options have this contrast word over here, but, and but. Choice C doesn't have that, and then the sentence structures essentially are diverse as well. So essentially, it becomes really challenging to use a splits method. So you were forced to use the meaning-based approach, and I wanted you to use the meaning-based approach in this, which is why we chose this. So what's the meaning-based method? In the meaning-based method, you first determine in step one what is that the author wants to communicate from the sentence. Why? Because there's a reason why any sentence is written. It has to communicate a certain meaning. It's not written to show the author's grammar prowess. It's written to communicate that meaning. So to identify the meaning or the goal of that sentence, we kind of split it into constituent chunks and really see what meanings do those chunks communicate. So let's do that with this sentence because it's a fairly complex one. So this is what we call as the sentence structure. You're an e-GMAT student, you've gone through the relevant files to get to figure out how to get to the sentence structure. The church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day. Why? With an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. That aspect is claimed by a few experts. Then the author says, but there's a contrast word but over here, but it is celebrated on this day to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. That's the more prevalent belief. So essentially, what do you have? You have two claims about why Valentine's Day is February 14th is celebrated as Valentine's Day. Claim one says that the church designated with a certain motive. Claim two says that it's to honor the anniversary of burial of Saint Valentine. So there's two distinct claims. Claim one is by one set of people, which is the few experts. Claim two is the more generic belief overall. So when you think about what the sentence wants to communicate, it wants to communicate these three aspects, and an answer choice that just does that's the correct answer choice will ensure that it communicates these three aspects. While selecting an answer, how many of you paid attention to the fact that you have to communicate these aspects? Or in other words, I want you to mark all the aspects that you weren't able to identify, that you did not take into account while selecting the correct answer. And this is a multiple response question. So if you missed aspect 1 and 2, you can choose both 1 and 2. If you missed 2 and 3, you can choose both 2 and 3. If you missed just 1, you can choose just 1. While selecting the correct answer, which aspects did you not take into account, or which aspects did you miss or could not identify? There are a few more responses here. Excuse me. All right. You know, broadcast results, and you can see the aspect one is really popular, aspect three is quite popular, aspect two is somewhat popular in this case. Yep. All right. Now this is really important. Why? Because if you miss a certain aspect, the first thing you've got to do, if you want to answer this question correctly, is make sure you build that ability to understand, to extract all the aspects of meaning. That's really important. That's the first skill that you build in SC. How many of you built that skill in SC while learning SC? Consciously. Okay, good. How many of you did not do that? Only care for grammar. All right. Grammar is always secondary to meaning. Let me be very, very clear. Grammar is a slave to meaning in every aspect. Okay. And a lot of grammarians don't understand this, and most of those are your English teachers, unfortunately. And we've had a bunch of English teachers to prove them why the way they think about English is wrong. And the GMAT does a phenomenal job of it. Okay. And the world, and we're moving there again in the world of AI and LLMs. That's where grammar starts to become even less important because each one of us now has the capability to write really well. Okay. So if you understood all three, then you have that meaning-based approach in your mind. Great. If you make a mistake, it will be because you didn't keep these aspects in mind, or it was because of grammar. Um, but if you left out even one or two aspects, then you definitely need to build a meaning-based approach. Okay. So let's kind of look at errors in the sentence. We're going to look at the first sentence, and you can see the subject verb pairs here. You can see subject verb pairs, but you see you have two verbs which do not have subjects. So you have missing subjects in this case, which is why choice A is wrong. Okay. How many of you were able to identify the missing subjects in choice A, and how many of you rejected choice A for that particular reason? How many of you could not do that and merely rejected choice A, saying that, hey, it doesn't sound right, other choices sound better, let me choose another answer choice? Again, really important to reject answer choices for the right reasons. Okay, let's look at choice. Actually, no one did choice B, so I'm not going to look at choice B. Let's look at choice C. It was the really popular choice. Let me share how you guys polled. This is how you guys polled. You can see all those of you who chose choice C. Choice C says, while a few experts claim that the church coined the date February 14, blah, 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 to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, their more prevalent belief. This word there, who does this there refer to? Who does there refer to? These group of experts. There refers to A. Is that what the sentence intended to communicate? No, right? Because of that, choice C is incorrect. People who chose choice C, can you see why choice C is wrong? And can you see the mistake you guys made? Sort of, okay. Why sort of? Why not absolutely yes? Okay, again, focus on meaning. Understand what does the yes, just the one mistake in C. There's nothing else. It's a beautifully written sentence, just communicates the wrong meaning. Nothing wrong grammar-wise in this choice. Grammatically, this is a beautiful sentence. Why there is wrong? In the original meaning, what's the source of claim to? In the original meaning, in choice A, what's the source of claim to? It's the general population, right? In in choice C, who has the prevalent belief? It's the same group of experts. Okay? Really important. Understand what does a sentence need to do. You guys understand why grammar exists in the first place? Why does grammar exist? Why was it built? Let's kind of take a very simple sentence. Two word, the simplest sentence. Subject and verb. Is this the correct sentence? He run? No. What should be the correct sentence? Okay. That's definitely. What about what's wrong with this? Why can't they run be the correct sentence? So, how do you decide when you see something like this, which of the options is correct? How do you make a decision? No, subject, verb, he, run could lead to either one of them. Past tenses, context, that's one good way. The other way you make a decision is by looking at subject verb agreement, and which is where grammar provides double confirmation, right? Which what I'm trying to tell you is what do we do when we do GMAT sentence correction? Do we care about meaning? No, we care about grammar and essentially leave the purpose of grammar behind. Are leaders supposed to be grammarians? Are they supposed to have perfect grammar? No. Satya Nadella doesn't. Larry Page doesn't. Sundar Pichai doesn't. Shantanu Narayan doesn't. Larry Ellison doesn't. What are they supposed to have? They're supposed to have precise communication, which is what GMAT SC tests. Your ability to communicate in a precise manner. Okay? It's not a test of grammar, it's a test of your ability to identify which sentence communicates the meaning. Okay? So focus on the meaning aspect. Let's look at choice D. Many of you chose choice D as well. Does that make sense, first of all? Does that make sense? Why the focus on meaning? Come on, I'm seeing very low energy. Does that make sense? I'm the one who's doing all the talking, guys. Although I do understand learning is also exhausting. All right. Choice D is wrong because of a nuance. It's a nuance that's tested really, really frequently on RC and sometimes on SC, but it's something that you really, really ought to know. Okay. Let's look at this sentence. Apple is a market leader, is claimed by Forbes magazine. Now, when you look at this sentence, I have two yes no statements. Are you communicating information? Are you making a claim here? Can you tell me the answer? You can write Y, N, 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 Y. There are four possible options. Yes, it's YN. Should you be blamed if it turns out that Apple is not the market leader? Absolutely not. So this is what it is. Everyone agrees with this? Okay. Yes. You're merely communicating information. Now, let's see what happens when you replace this is with as. Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. What happens now? Are you communicating information? Absolutely. Are you making a claim? No, you are still communicating information. Yes. And you will be blamed if it turns out that Apple is not the market leader. Why is it that you're making a claim here? What you're really saying is, yes, Forbes magazine is saying that, but if you use the word as, all you're saying is, I am backing that claim. I agree with Forbes magazine. Okay. Is that clear? So when you use as, you are backing that claim. Now, in the original sentence, is the author backing any claim? Is the author backing any claim? No. But when you use as claimed by a few experts, you are backing a claim. In the original sentence, the author is merely communicating information. Okay, really important to understand. Again, meaning. Let's look at the correct answer. Choice E. That the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day is claimed by a few experts, but the more prevalent belief is, again, there's no backing of claim. The author is merely communicating information. All the subjects are there. You know, all claims are by different entities, and the entities that the author intended to be, and aspect one is taken care of, aspect two is taken care of, aspect three is taken care of, which makes a sentence the correct sentence. Now, why do people reject this? They don't like a sentence starting with that. They rarely say there has to be a that over here. And some people think it's claimed as passive, and they don't like this as, and then they reject it. How many of you did that? I don't like this thing starting with that. I think there has to be a that as a connector. Okay. All of these misnomers. Go to our YouTube channel, you'll really see when is that necessary over in this context and when it isn't. Okay, you'll be able to understand that. Passive voice is absolutely okay on the GMAT. It's a construct of English. It's used when you're not certain of who the doer of the action is. Okay. There's nothing that says passive voice is wrong on the GMAT. There's nothing that says being is wrong on the GMAT. Okay. And this is where, when you review incorrect choices, there were no grammatical errors here, barring choice A, where you had a subject verb error or missing subjects. Choices B, C, and D were grammatically correct, but they changed the meaning. Okay. The other thing is, did you really see the various sentence structures? Just in one sentence, there are about 8 to 10 different combinations of sentence structures that existed. And this is the beauty of understanding how sentence structures render a meaning. And if you understand that, you're able to reject answer choices with a lot of confidence. Another thing that you probably notice, is I didn't use any archaic grammatical term here. I didn't really just say this kind of modifier, that kind of modifier. I focus purely on logic. That's what GMAT sees, frankly. Pure logic. And if you want to get to that 90th percentile, focus on the logical aspect of sentence correction. You'd be able to do that. But to do that, you need to make sure you understand stuff at a molecular or a sentence structure level in this case. And to do that, you need that feedback over here, which is where, for those of you, gone through our SC course, you really see every learning activity is scored. It gives you feedback based on how you go through that learning activity. Similarly, cementing and application files, you get feedback. Similarly, in Scholaranium, we track your accuracy not only at an aggregate level, where you say if you've solved 100 SC questions, how have you done overall? But we can also track your accuracy in the last 10 questions, compare it to 10 questions prior, to really track your improvement. Okay. After completion of SC course, how should someone proceed? Can someone tell me? What should you do next after finishing the SC course? What's the next step? Finish what? Cementing, yes. What metric should you be hitting? What's medium cementing? What's the minimum threshold? 70% accuracy. Hard cementing, what's the threshold? 55. Do at least 3 quizzes in each. You have about 10 quizzes in each, or 9 quizzes in each. So you have 3 times as many quizzes. Okay. You do that, you hit those ceilings, you cross those ceilings, you'd be set. And if you want to know how that feedback's given, you can watch this video. It's on our public website. But it's only when you hit the metrics, you achieve that high ability, and the entire prep is trackable because of that. Okay. Just in the context of SC or CR or RC or data insights or quants, very, very similar. But just in the context of SC, you have 100 odd personalized feedback points that are there. Okay. And when people do well on a majority of these feedback points, that's when they get to this group over here, which is uh, where they get to a 700 or higher score, and which is why we deliver that kind of success. Okay, it's not about just about the content or the method. It's also about the trackability. It's also about the feedback. It's also about the personalization. Um, if you write to an e-GMAT strategy expert and say, "Hey, this is where I'm not able to improve on this," they can look at the data and tell you where you're faltering, why you're faltering, what is it that you should go and revise. Okay. So with that, I've come to the end of this webinar. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this webinar. If you have questions, I'd be happy to take those. I have a couple of questions in the Q&A pod, but yeah, those of you who don't have questions, I'd love to get feedback on the webinar. A couple of questions in the Q&A pod. Will the executive assessment be changing to? No, the executive assessment is the model on which everything's been put in place. So I don't expect it to change tremendously. It could change slightly, but not tremendously. So it's not going to be that scale of change that you've seen on the current GMAT. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do so. You have my LinkedIn contact. You have access the link to our YouTube channel as well. Okay. When will we have the mocks for GMAT Focus? Very, very soon. I'm planning to launch the mocks within the next 10 days. You'd see Scholarinium come in within the next week, and then the mocks right after that. For those of you who've been participating in Scholarinium trials, you've already seen the quality of questions that are there. If you still have your doubts, that you can start the last SC example with the church coin, write to me, and we'll address those doubts. We'll probably create a personalized Loom video. Again, remember, my goal was not to teach you SC, but to tell you why some people remain stuck at that 60th percentile. How do you progress despite having a planner? I don't understand the usage of word despite there. You have a planner, it tells you the sequence of things, it gives you really good time estimates, which are taken from the kind of people who've been in your shoes and the kind of time they've taken. So execute on it. And if you face issues, write to us. We have a really active GMAT strategy team. So do write to us overall. So how do you effectively use PSP and Scholarinium as an e-GMAT? Go through the Getting Started module. Look at the sequence that's listed over there. Please follow that sequence. Do not skip the cementing stage after you've done the course. Please don't do that. And I think that's all that you need. Link to the next session. Let me bring that the link to the next session as well. Coming free webinars has the link to tomorrow's session. So that's the NP webinar. You should be able to click on this, and the CR webinar. Also, the links are on our homepage. If you scroll to the bottom of the homepage, you should be able to get to it as well. Link for the mock test. All right, let me give a link to the Sigma X mock test. As the link to a Sigma X mock test. Where should you contact me? Email or LinkedIn? Either one's works, I would say. So, will your GMAT preparation help with CAT? Okay. On the verbal side, tremendously. On the quant side, somewhat is what I would say. GMAT quant's much more strategic than CAT quant. So verbal side, tremendously, yes. How many hours are required daily to study? So we recommend people spend about 18 hours a week at a bare minimum, and so For working professionals, this varies. So there are certain people who and the new planner allows you to put in time estimates by the day of the week. But yeah, some people really say I'm going to put in about 8 hours during the weekdays together. So 1.5 to 2 hours per weekday, and then 10 hours during the weekend. Others do it in a slightly different manner or so. So it completely depends on how you plan to do this. I'm failing to plan when to give GMAT, planning for GFE. Take the starting score, take the starting mock test, and then from that point on, you should just execute on it. The GFE will tell you, the planner will tell you when should you take the exam. The PDF, top left hand corner, you have the PDF for today's session. You can download it. Okay. Is there an option to tinker with the PSP once it's formulated? Yeah, you can tinker with it as many times as you want. Absolutely, yes. You can change your starting scores, and of course, the PSP will react to it accordingly. We do understand plans change, yes. Last webinar of quants. Absolutely. Can you write to me, please? Let me see. If you write to me, I can send it to you, Avinash. Is there a difference between the GMAT in 2021 versus 2023? No, the current edition, no difference. So not a whole lot, no. Does one have to be exceptionally brilliant to excel on the GMAT? Not really. It's not acing the GMAT's not rocket science, but one has to be exceptionally diligent to ace the GMAT. Let me say that. Just the syllabus is vast, and if you're a working professional, it takes a lot more effort. Does the planner include GFE? Absolutely, the planner does include GFE. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'd really be able to see a couple of videos on the new planner and what all does it give you. Okay. All right, guys. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. And if you have questions, write to me on my email or on my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn's right there. Also, you can write to me on Reddit as well. All right. Thank you very much, and have a phenomenal rest of the day or rest of the evening if you are from Asia. Thank you, and bye bye. Oh, I got another question. Okay, this is a good one. For tomorrow's session, if you've not started NP, shall you still attend the webinar tomorrow? Yes, you can still attend the webinar tomorrow. It will tell you the basics. Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you very much.